Oftentimes, when we think of language learning, we can think of it as building a house. It's a very long project, it's a time consuming uh, project that requires a lot of initial setup and a lot of planning and a lot of details and architecture. And a lot of what happens with people is that they put a lot of time and effort into setting up the foundations. And you'll see that the house from the outside, it's there, the wood is all set in place, the concrete is there. But then it's missing all the floors and it's missing all the stairs, it's missing all the wood panels, and it's missing a lot of what makes a house a house. It's unlivable in it. From the outside, you can look at it and it looks nice, the ceiling is there and whatnot, and the roof, but the inside, the meat of it is kind of empty. And what that correlates to is knowing a lot of things in a language but not being able to use it. Like you have that the rooms, the sort of outline, the structure is there. When you see it, you can feel it, but in terms of its functionality, it just isn't there. And a lot of students don't know why. A lot of people who are studying the language just don't know what will take them to that next level. So what they end up doing is they end up building more rooms, but they never finish the rooms. And so you get this house that keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The foundation gets bigger, but the inside is hollow and empty. So even though you have a beautiful and very large mansion, it's empty inside. And the reason for that is because they're forgetting a very core concept of language learning, and that's fluency development. 안녕하세요, Cloud입니다. Hey guys, Cloud here. Today we're talking about what I think is the most forgotten part of language learning, which is fluency development. Think of reading a book about swimming. You can read that book. You can memorize every single thing. You can describe to a pro swimmer, to Michael Phelps, exactly how he does his strokes and what body parts move at what times and what coordination. And you can be an expert on it. But once you get into the water, it all goes out the window. Like you might have the knowledge, you may have studied it, but you've never practiced it. You never developed fluency in the things that you already learned. And that's why when it comes to language learning, when you learn a lesson, you don't just move on to the next lesson and learn more grammar and more vocab and more, nuances and more phrases. What you need to do is you need to take that and you need to practice it. You need to develop. You need to be fluent in the things that you know. And that's why there's this paradigm where you see some people, they know very, very, very little of a language, but they speak it with confidence and they can communicate with people. Whereas you might know 10 times more than what they know, but you just can't communicate the way they can. Why is that? It's because what little they have, they've used so much. They're fluent in that little bit that they have. And sometimes that can be better than being fluent or not being fluent in a lot of things. Knowing a lot, but not being able to use it, not being able to utilize the things that you're learning. So this is something that really needs to be focused on. Now, how do you become fluent in the things that you know? What is this fluency development? And how can you use it in order to make use of the things that you've already learned? So that's the first thing. Fluency development is not studying new material. It's not going over concepts that you haven't seen before. It's not memorizing new vocabulary. It's none of that. What it is you're taking material that you're already comfortable with, things that if you see or hear, you know what it means, but you wouldn't necessarily be able to produce it yourself. It's things that you don't have any doubt in your mind what it means when you see it written down or when you hear it. But the act of actually producing it, or the act of maybe when you hear it, you can't, like your listening comprehension isn't there yet. That's sort of the type of material, the content, the type of material that you want to use with. So if you're, intermediate, maybe some of the more beginner concepts you're fluent in, but some of the more, upper beginner concepts might be difficult for you to use, even though you understand them. They're not difficult for you, but you just you've never really used them, you've never practiced them. Those are the kind of things you take. You take maybe a text, maybe a graded reader, and you would read it out. And then when you're done reading, you could summarize it. And that could be summarize it using writing. So you can write down, say I'm going to go no more than 200 words. I'm going to summarize what that story was about, what that text that I just read. And then when you're done with that, you can say, okay, now I'm going to give myself 5 minutes to talk about that story. And you talk about it in 5 minutes. And then if you have a partner, maybe they can give you some feedback on some things that you did. And then you can try doing it again, but this time in 4 minutes. And then again, they can give you some feedback, maybe a phrase that you were struggling with. They can tell you what it was, maybe a word that you've forgotten or a word that you misused, something like that. And then you can do it again in 3 minutes. You don't need a partner to do this. You could do this yourself. It still has the same effect. It's just sometimes it makes it easier if someone you have a language exchange partner. You can do this kind of stuff with them. But that's just one example. I love linked skill activities for my students because as a teacher, I don't have much time with them, and it's always useful to be able to activate multiple aspects of the language. They're listening, they're writing, and they're reading all at once, and with one activity, with one text. It makes it easier for me to prepare because I have this one text that I'm going to be using for multiple different exercises, so I don't have to prepare multiple different texts, multiple different exercises. And at the same time, it sets up the foundation. They might read the text, they understand the text completely. And that's sort of where the fluency development comes from, is that you give them something easy, almost like a freebie, the reading part. And it sets up, they're going to use that similar language when they're writing. They might be very comfortable writing. So usually it goes from easy to hard. So if speaking is the hardest thing, I would keep that as the last exercise. If writing is the hardest thing for them, I would keep that as the last exercise. I would go from easiest to hardest. Maybe both of them are fairly difficult. Reading and writing are both difficult. So what I might do is I might have them read the text, and then I'll read the text out loud for them. So now they're practicing their listening, but they've already read the text, so they already have a base understanding of the text. So now what we're doing is we're not learning anything new, we're just developing fluency in the things that they already know. So the idea is there. And then we go on to either reading or writing, or speaking, whichever is on the agenda that day. So yeah, that's one example of activity you can do. The activities, really, you can be as creative as you'd like with any of these activities. It could literally be you take maybe a grammatical concept that you understand and you know, but you just struggle using it. And you make a mock, sort of lesson. And you are the one explaining the grammar concept to just this imaginary student. Or actually get someone and be like, hey, today I'm going to teach you about temune, and this is what it is. You could do that. Oftentimes when you teach something, it'll point out the flaws that you don't know, or it'll solidify your knowledge. And then maybe, you'll make example sentences with it, and then you'll, look for it in a text and a lot of different things. The point I'm trying to make is if you do not go back in and fill all those holes, so you've learned it, you've built the outline of the room, but you haven't filled the room, and there's no floor in the room, there's no walls, there's nothing in that room. You need to go back and really develop fluency in the things that you know. And this should be a process that you do all the time. So you learn something, and then you practice it, and then you learn something else new, and then you practice that new thing, but alongside with that new thing, you're practicing the things that you already know. That's also part of a language, is that it builds on top of each other. It's not like you learn one thing, you use one thing. You learn the second thing, you use the second thing, and you don't use the first one anymore. If you learn how to say chonen, you're always going to be saying that in whatever, regardless of future lessons that you learn. Now, as you get more and more advanced, you get to learn more niche things. But in general, as you're going up the ladder of language learning, you're going to be repeating a lot of the same concepts in the new concepts, because you need the old concepts to actually use the new concepts. And that just further solidifies the older concepts and helps you build fluency in the newer concepts. But yeah, this shouldn't be something where you're spending all your time on. You shouldn't be like, okay, I'm going to stop learning. All I'm going to do is fluency development, unless you feel like you really lack it. But in general, fluency development shouldn't be more than, I don't know, if you're spending 2 hours every week studying a language, 15 to 20 minutes, that might be a good estimate. It also depends on the type of things you're doing in your language learning. Are you fully focused on all 4 aspects? Are you doing, listening, reading, writing? I guess this is a topic for a different video. The different strands of language learning, and sort of within the strands, what are the different ways you can learn between input, output, um, uh, immersion, what's the word? When you're intensive and extensive, I'm sorry, intensive and extensive reading. Is it passive or is it active? Things like that. There's a lot that you can sort of play around with. So that more comes into building a routine for yourself. But definitely part of your language learning routine should have fluency development. And a lot of people will try that. Oh, that's my output part. My output is fluency development. That's not necessarily true. Your input can be fluency development too. You can take a text that is easier for you, that you're comfortable with the material, and you can read it and then listen to it, and develop your fluency in the easier material, in being able to read easy material, in being able to comprehend easy material, in being able to listen and have the listening comprehension to easier material. That will help with your fluency development. So it's not just about output; it can be also input too. So that's what I usually find is a major is missing. It's completely forgotten. Like, people don't think about it. Whereas when you learn things in sports, you learn one thing and then you go through drills. You're doing it over and over and over until you are fluent in that motion, in that activity, in that play. Basically, you keep practicing. You never sort of learn something and then throw it to the wayside, because then why'd you learn it? It's no point. But yeah, those are my I guess observation with my students and the things that I find that they're missing. Let me know what you think. Do you think fluency development is something that most people forget, or is it just something that's difficult? Why is it that people don't do this very often? Is it that they don't know how to, or they're just not aware of its importance, or what do you think? Let me know.